The American Revolution is one of, if not the most well-known revolution in history. This revolution changed the world in many ways. Great Britain's, the world's largest army, defeated at the hands of 13 scrawny colonies in America. It brought democracy to the forefront with the phrases no taxation without representation and all men are created equal, while hypocritical, are also world renowned for their importance. While this revolution's first battle wasn't until the battles of Lexington and Concord on the 19th of April 1775, the hostilities started much earlier. Arguably, the most important part of the revolution happened on the 16th day of December 1773 in Boston, the Boston Tea Party. The British and the French fought the 7 Years' War for 7 years. Its conclusion on February 10th, 1763, while resulting in an English victory, took a huge toll on the British economy. The British needed extra cash to fuel their economy, and fast. The British passed the Stamp Act of 1765 in 1765, and it basically said that all newspapers and paper materials made in the American colonies were to be printed with paper from London. This act was met with fierce resistance from the colonists, who were against the fact that they were being directly taxed without being represented in the British Parliament. This tax was repealed on the 18th of March 1766, but the British Parliament averred that they and they alone had the right to designate taxes on the American colonies, which they demonstrated by passing the Declaratory Act of 1766. By this point, the American colonists were enraged. On May 10th, 1773, the British signed the Tea Act of 1773. This act allowed the British East India Company to sell directly to the colonies, creating a monopoly. While this did lower taxes, it kept in place previous taxes, which the colonists weren't happy about. The signing of this act is generally seen as the last straw for many Americans fed up with British rule. In late 1773, 7 ships carrying East India Company tea were sent to the colonies. 4 were bound for Boston, and 1 each for New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston, South Carolina. The ships contained over 2,000 chests, representing nearly 600,000 pounds of tea. Americans learned the details of the Tea Act while the ships were en route, and opposition began to mount. Whigs, sometimes calling themselves the Sons of Liberty, began a campaign to raise awareness and to convince or compel the consignees to resign, in the same way that the stamp distributors had been forced to resign in the 1765 Stamp Act crisis. The protest movement that culminated with the Boston Tea Party was not a dispute about high taxes. As mentioned earlier, the price of legally imported tea was actually reduced by the Tea Act of 1773. Protesters were instead concerned with a variety of other issues. The familiar no taxation without representation argument, along with the question of the extent of Parliament's authority in the colonies, remained prominent. In New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston, protesters compelled the tea consignees to resign. There was mass protest meetings in Philadelphia, during which Benjamin Rush urged his fellow countrymen to oppose the landing of the tea, because the cargo contained the seeds of slavery. In every colony except Massachusetts, protesters were able to force the tea consignees to resign or to return the tea to England. In Boston, however, Governor Thomas Hutchinson was determined to hold his ground. He convinced the tea consignees, 2 of whom were his sons, not to back down. When the ship arrived in the harbor in late November, Whig leader Samuel Adams called for a mass meeting to be held on November 29, 1773. Thousands of people arrived, so many that the meeting was moved to a larger building. British law required Dartmouth to unload and pay the duties within 20 days, or customs official could confiscate the cargo. The mass meeting passed a resolution, introduced by Adams and based on a similar set of resolutions implemented earlier in Philadelphia, urging the captain of the Dartmouth to send the ship back without paying the import duty. Meanwhile, the meeting assigned 25 men to watch the ship and prevent the tea from being unloaded. While Samuel Adams tried to reassert control of the meeting, people poured out of the Old South Meeting House to prepare to take action. In some cases, this involved donning what may have been elaborately prepared Mohawk costumes. While disguising their individual faces was imperative because of the illegality of their protest, dressing as Mohawk warriors was a specific and symbolic choice. It showed that the Sons of Liberty identified with America over their official status as subjects of Great Britain. That night, a group of 30 to 130 men boarded the three vessels and, over the course of 3 hours, dumped all 340 chests of tea into the water. Another tea ship, intended for Boston, ran aground at Cape Cod in December 1773, and its tea was taxed and sold to private parties. In March 1774, the Sons of Liberty received information that this tea was being held in a warehouse in Boston. They then entered the warehouse and destroyed all they could find. Many Americans, including Samuel's cousin and future president John Adams, considered drinking tea unpatriotic after this event. Even though this event wasn't called the Boston Tea Party until 1834, going by the destruction of tea until then, this event cemented itself in the popular American folklore and led many Americans to be inspired by the success of the event. The first battles of the Revolution, Lexington and Concord, were fought on April 19, 1775, no more than 20 miles away from Boston. Stick around for next time, where I go over how Michigan was instrumental in the overturning of the 18th Amendment and Prohibition in the 1930s.